You might know Metal Fight Beyblade as a show you used to watch as a kid, or if you're someone like me, perhaps it's a show that motivated you and helped you find hope and purpose in life, as well as recover and get out of some really horrible mental states. But no matter the extent to which you have watched it or analyzed it, I guarantee there's still a lot of fun facts you don't know about that I, after having translated over 90 episodes, have tried to compile in this video. This is mainly going to be about the anime, and there's a lot, so get ready and let me know if there are any things that I missed. With that being said, let's start. Layer 1. The surface of the iceberg. These will be things that if you're a very avid fan of the show, you'll probably know as they are far from hidden. But if you're not an avid fan and member of the community, there's a good chance you don't know about. First of all, we have one small animation error in episode 1 of the show, which actually only appears in the English dub. It is after Jinga defeats the Face Hunters, and you see the counter actually starts out at 37,000 points, but then ends at 03795. Unlike in the original Japanese dub, where his points go up to 37,050, as it should be. Funnily enough, only a few seconds earlier, there is one of the only extremely rare examples of visual censorship, and that is Benkei getting hit in the crotch. That's how it is in the original, but in the English dub he just stands there mesmerized. One of the most known differences between the sub and dub versions of MFB is that there were some changes to the names of the base. Most notably this includes Pegasus instead of the original name Pegasus, Scorpio instead of Escopio, Earth-Ego instead of Earth-Aquila, Fireblaze instead of Phoenix, Striker instead of Unicorno, Grand Cetus instead of Grand Ketos, Gravity Destroyer instead of Gravity Perseus, Cyclone Herculeo instead of Tornado Herculeo, Evil Befall instead of Killer Befall, Hades Curbex instead of Hell Curbex, Spiral Capricorn instead of Screw Capricorne, Twisted Tempo instead of Basalt Herogium, Cosmic Pegasus instead of Big Bang Pegasus, Odrago Destructor instead of Odrago Destroy, Firefuse Darkhelm instead of Fusion Hades, and more. One more interesting fact to note is that in the Japanese dub, Storm Aquario is actually called Wind Aquario, and Rock Ares is instead Clay Ares. Wind and Clay are both light wheels, aka non-metal wheels, that in real life can only be found in Japanese random boosters and were never released worldwide. Something useful to know is the original names of the MFB seasons. While Season 1 in English-speaking countries was called Beyblade Metal Fusion, in Japan it was just Metal Fight Beyblade. Season 2 is generally known as Metal Masters, but originally was Metal Fight Beyblade Baku, with the last word meaning explosion in Japanese, which is why sometimes you might see it as MFB Explosion instead. And the equivalent to Metal Fury is Metal Fight Beyblade 4D. Shogun Steel's original name was Zero G, presumably as a pun on Zero's name, which in the Japanese dub is called Zero, not Zero, and also to mean zero gravity. One of the most disappointing facts about the MFB is that despite it having an absolutely incredible soundtrack, it was never released, and the only versions we can find are rips from the anime done by people who have tried to remove the dialogue and sound effects to the best of their ability, which you can find such on YouTube channels such as FlexStats and Coach Steel. To find out why that is though, I emailed one of the composers, Neil Parfit, and he said that there's never been any official statement or fact, and thus asked me to also not mention any rumors, so that's how it is. He's actually worked on a pretty insane amount of stuff though, and there's a very good chance you've heard his work in more than just Beyblade. A list of his works can be found on his website neilparfit.com, as well as his social media and his story of how he got into music. He responded very quickly and was super friendly, so allow me to say thank you Neil Parfit and his partner in Metal Fight Beyblade, Scott Buxes, for the incredible music he has created. Layer 0. The transition into the unknown. Now in this section we will cover animation errors, which will transition us nicely into the underside of the iceberg, as some are pretty commonly known, while others not so much. I must warn you however that some of these errors come from fan favorite episodes, so if you don't want to slightly weave your perception of them, I recommend skipping this section and moving onwards. One of the more well-known errors that sometimes Libra may appear instead of Sagittario, and here's one example of it in the fight between Kenta and Ryuga. Another one is Rock Leon appearing instead of Fang Leon. Here are some examples of that happening as well. In episode 35, Odrago's dark move was shown striking onto Pisces instead of Capricorn, as you can see in the background. In episode 37, when Sora goes to battle Busujima a second time, there are a few mistakes we can spot. Both Sora and Busujima usually use string launchers, but here there's ripcord randomly popping out from Sora's launcher grip, which then disappears after being covered by Cyber. And when Busujima launches, a ripcord randomly appears for him out of thin air as well. Another thing we can notice is that the non-3D Bey models don't even leave the launchers, and we don't even see Sora put his Bey on the launcher. I guess I'm not the only one who found this episode to be boring. Now, in episode 2 of the series, when Madoka is fixing up Pegasus, for some reason in early releases the pre-hybrid Pegasus wheel is shown instead of the Storm wheel, but in later releases that is fixed. Whether it's an actual error or just a fun Easter egg, who knows? But it is certainly one very curious detail. Moving on, in episode 139 we have a similar though perhaps not identical situation. An animation error that was straight up an animation error shown on TV but then fixed in later releases again. You can see on early uploads on YouTube that Flash Sagittarius special move explodes into Nemesis Metal Fusion Hades. That was fixed in the English dub and later Japanese releases. There are many instances of Big Bang Pegasus not starting out in the right mode when the sequence for the mode change comes on. For example, in the final episode, Pegasus first switches to Barrage mode, but then when it switches to Smash mode, it's shown being in its default mode again. The final error I have for you is in episode 97, where Pegasus and Sagittaria don't appear in the launcher before being launched, as you can see in the back. Layer -1. For the first layer of the underneath, we have another instance of censorship in the English dub of Beyblade. In episode 117, when the Gracies, or as the English version calls them, Garcias, are pretend arguing, Ian actually slaps Enzo and Selen in the original version, and Team Dungeon as well as Tsubasa are quite shocked by it. I actually didn't know about this until a few months ago, but I suppose it's for the better that it was removed. If you've watched the sub version of MFB, you're probably also aware that there are quite a bit of name changes in the English dub compared to the Japanese version. And another fun fact is that much of the time, names in Japanese have meanings and are made up of actual words, so we will slowly transition into this as well. In the original, Captain Capri is actually Dat Capri, Doji is named Daidoji, the Garcias are instead called Gracies, as we already covered. One of the most intriguing ones is that Julian Concern in the Japanese dub is actually Julius Caesar, and concern is actually a German word which is a specific type of business group that is common in Europe. Wales in the Japanese dub is called Wels, and Klaus is named Georg. Anton, who is the manager of the Russian team, is called Putin, and he got fired because of budget cuts in the original and not for the terrible way he acted in the English version. Good change from the English version. Lyra from the same team was instead Dora, and Damure's name is slightly changed, I think, as it was originally Damure. A few things to clear up when it comes to names. You might have sometimes seen Dynamis' name spelled with a U instead of a Y in stopped episodes, but both ways are actually correct. Damien's second name can be either Heart with an E or Heart without an E. Both are correct as well. Jinga's name is supposed to be pronounced Ginga, not Jinga. And as for the spelling, technically there's no real reason you couldn't spell it out Gingka, but by default it's not really supposed to have a K. His name means galaxy, while his surname Hagane means steel. The name of Jinga's dad was not Ryo but Ryusei, which means falling/shooting star or meteor. Hoikuro, which I'm honestly not sure how it's officially spelled in English, is rather Hokuto, which in Japanese is the name of the asterism known as the Big Dipper or the Plow, or it can also be referring to the Chinese Beidou navigation satellite system. Kenta's second name, Yumiya, is a wordplay, since usually that would mean bow and arrow, but it is actually written with different characters, the first of which can instead mean hot water or bath, and the second of which can mean palace or shrine, and a few other things, but these are the main ones. Masamune's surname, Kadoya, is comprised of the characters meaning horn and valley respectively. And the name Masamune seems to be a reference to the great swordsmen from the late 13th and early 14th century, whose swords are renowned for exceptional quality and beauty. We can also make a connection from this to Masamune's special move, Lightning Sword Flourish. Yu's first name means play, while her second name, Tendo, means channel. Yu's nickname for Kyoya is also different in the Japanese version. It's not Yo-Yo, but instead Tatekyo, comprised of Kyoya's two names, the second of which, Tategami, usually means mane, like of a lion, but here it's actually written with two different characters, meaning shield and god instead. Benkei's second name, Hanawa, weirdly enough means red or garland. The Shian's name is originally Dashan, spelled like this, which is written with two characters, the first of which means big and the second means soar or fly. His second name, Wang, means king. Ryuga's name means Dragon Fang or Fangs, and one misconception we should clear up about him is that he does not have a second name, even though it may appear on some YouTube videos to be Kishata. It is never mentioned in the anime, and the author of the manga has confirmed there is no such thing as well. There are many more characters with interesting name meanings, so if you want to read up more on this, you can check out Yuria's Tumblr blog in the description, and big thank you to her for helping me with these. Now we move on to talking about one fun side of special moves. In the original Japanese dub, special moves are usually English said with a Japanese accent, or just plain Japanese. But later on, like in the second season, when we see characters from foreign countries, some of them have foreign special moves as well. The best example of this is Georg, all of whose special moves are in German. Claw of the Storm 1st, 2nd and 3rd are called out in German as Sturmnagel Ester, Zweiter, Dritter, sorry if I butchered that, and Steel Darknesses as well, being Eisenschwarz, which more accurately seems to mean Iron Darkness and not Steel Darkness. Xiaoshin from Team Wanku Zhong has one special move in Chinese, his left and right reverse wheeling arms, which takes the romanization of this, which I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce, but it's something like Zoyo Dao Gong. And it is an actual Tai Chi technique, which seems to take the name of Repost Monkey. Something you may have seen in some sub-versions of Beyblade is that the translations say special spin move instead of just special move. That is because usually the way you say special move in Japanese is with the words hisatsu and waza. However, Beyblade has actually made up a word of its own and added another character to the second word, the character which means spin, which makes this into the word tengi, aka spin technique. That is why some translations prefer to translate the whole as special spin move, but it sounds much lamer and less powerful, which is why it is omitted most of the time. Even if mentioning the word spin is technically more accurate, it vastly changes the mood and energy of the phrase, which is sometimes more important than straight one-to-one translation. But hey, such details are why I'm making this video, and now you know. If you've watched season 2 of FNFB Sub, then you have also probably heard the ending song Ozura o Koete Yuke, sung by the band Odoribaso, and is the only song that has most unfortunately not received a full version. To verify why that is, I actually found the Twitter account of the vocalist, whose name is, I believe, Fumihiko Tsuchiya, but I'm not entirely sure, who said that the band stopped in 2010 and held one last farewell night concert later in 2015. He said that due to the circumstances of no stopping, they were unable to release a full version. Given this, we do not know why the band had to stop, and therefore we should please refrain from making assumptions, and it is also not entirely clear whether a full version existed but was not released, or if they just didn't get around to making it at all. But the artist is still active in making music, and he was kind and quick to respond as well, so if you'd like to check him out and support him, I'll leave his links in the description too. On to our next topic. Something that some Beyblade fans may consider a plot hole is that in Season 3, when the legendary Bladers went to try and stop the revival of Nemesis, Barry Aries never actually battled in any of the stadiums that were transferring energy to Nemesis, so Nemesis couldn't have gotten King's Star Fragment. There was a video made about this a few years ago, and it correctly states that Nemesis actually obtained the powers of every Blade the legendary Bladers had fought, and naturally they have also fought King. However, that is not all there is to it. Haven't you ever wondered how Nemesis was able to do that? What if I told you there's an actual proper explanation for it, that has been set up since the very first season, and also, possibly, a reason for why he had to get Ryuga's power directly. This is a topic much too deep for only the first layer of the iceberg, but stick around and I promise we shall cover it near the end. Now, it's time for another example of censorship in the English dub, but this time it's a lot more serious, which is why I have to warn you. Trigger warning: if you're depressed, have PTSD from depression, or anything similar, consider skipping to the timestamp on screen. In episode 67, when Ganghang Galaxy spots Sophie, you might think they were just being worried for her falling off that cliff since she was so close to the edge, but the reality is, in the original, they actually thought she was going to jump to kill herself.
まさか飛び込むつもりじゃ。やばい。理由は知らないが、この世にはまだまだ楽しいことがいっぱいあるんだぜ。そうだ。例えばベイとかベイとかベイとか。
やだ、勘違いしないでよ。私は遺跡を調べに来ただけだから。
は？
そう。こう見えても私は考古学者を目指してるの。
Suicide is unfortunately a very prevalent problem in Japan, and this was one example of such representation. One of my favorite characters in Beyblade, and also most fascinating in my opinion, is Ryutaro. Something that, again, is changed in the English version for some reason, is that he actually has what he calls a secret move, with much emotion and implicit meaning behind it. In episode 43, when Ryutaro is forced to fight Jinga a second time, this time in order to save his own life and be spared from Ryuga and Ojiro, he sees no hope. He's had a vision of the future world, destroyed with Ojiro standing as Emperor. The only thing he can do now is what the Dark Nebula asks of him, and pray for mercy from them. Thus, he does something he considers of a demonic nature. He uses his base power in a way not shown before now, not only to manipulate the airflow around his opponent and cause them a headache, but he uses a secret move, which the English dub just calls a normal special move, Burning Hell, directly onto his opponent to manipulate their brain and senses and make them lose consciousness. When it doesn't work on Jinga, he uses another technique, this time on Nate, to bring cold to the brain, as if freezing. And later, his words imply that this should have put Jinga into a permanent trance, or maybe even death. For he says to Jinga that perhaps it's better he lost here, since it means he won't get to see that dark future. Afterwards, when Ryutaro is defeated, you might notice he even leaves his bay behind. Whether this is intentional or just a mistaken production, we can't know, but I believe it possible that Ryutaro did that on purpose, so that Ryuga and Ryutaro would have less power to steal from him. Speaking about Ryuga, there is one very common misconception about him, outside of him having a second name, and that is him having a special move, which he does not. He has 2 moves in the first season, both of which are dark moves. In the second season, many people assume that Dragon Emperor Supreme Flight is a special move, however, it is never referred to as such. The only time Dragon Emperor Supreme Flight's type is referred to is after Ryuga's battle with Kenta in the 3rd season, where he calls it an ultimate move. For some reason, I've heard some people say that the English dub mistranslated that line, and he actually said special move in the Japanese dub, but that is not true. In both versions, he calls it an ultimate move, despite also having his other one, Dragon Emperor Life Destructor. Something that is, however, mostly omitted in the English dub are Ryuga's death threats. There are many examples of such, a few of which you can see in the background. But that also poses an interesting question for us to answer. Did Ryuga ever actually kill? Perhaps the most unfortunate scene of him going pure out in destruction without the influence of the Dark Power was in episode 115, when he finds out the Babylonian tournament does not actually have a legendary bay as a prize. We see him attack the poor guy waiting at the top and perhaps destroy some or all of the tower. However, even in this most dangerous scene, we see that the person he threatens still makes it out no problem, perhaps terrified but physically fine. In episode 133, when he breaks his way through to the Mayan temple, we can see that the people in his way there also survive, so this makes it very unlikely in my opinion that Ryuga ever fatally harmed anyone in seasons 2 or 3. Layer -2. Now we move on to the next layer of the iceberg, and we start off with a fun and little known fact, a very obscure translation error in episode 33. During Jinga's battle with Phoenix, in the English dub, Madoka has the line, "A metal performance dip creates a lot of friction and resistance." But in the original Japanese dub, she actually says it has extremely low frictional resistance, which is the complete opposite. A pretty much irrelevant and yet uncommon mistake from the dub. What's not that uncommon from the dub though is to have special moves slightly changed or in very few occasions straight up omitted or incorrectly translated. Such examples include Jinga's Star Blast attack originally having the name Shooting Star attack in the Japanese dub, Star Booster attack being Stargazer instead, and Cosmic Tornado being Big Bang Tornado, matching the name change of the bay as well, which is because Jinga named Big Bang Pegasus because of something that happened during Big Bang Bladers, and Big Bang Bladers was the name of the World Championships in Season 2 in the Japanese dub, but they didn't have that name in the English dub, so they had to come up with another name for Big Bang Pegasus, since Big Bang was not the term that was used before. Some of Yu's special moves are also changed. Infernal Blast was originally Last Judgment Inferno, and Final Infernal Blast is instead Final Judgment Inferno. Phoenix's move was changed from the original Burning Explosion to Burning Fire Strike. Hikaru's special move was changed from Infinity Wave to Infinite Assault. Dobio's special move, which in the Japanese dub was called Screw Death Driver, actually has 2 versions in the English dub. It debuted as Lightning Screwdriver, but was then for some reason changed again to Spin Screwdriver. Kumasuke Kumade's special move Bear Claw Smash was originally Salmon Slap. Hyoma's moves, which you may know as Windstorm Assault and Horn Crow Destruction, were originally called Gone with the Wind and Sheephorn Crow. Regi's dark move, which the English dub changed to Venom Strike, in Japanese has the name Venom Genocide. One change I actually like from the dub is the addition of King in Kyoya's Sly and Furious Blast Shot move. That was not in the original, but it sounds so much better in my opinion. Chion's special move, Tempestuous Whirlwind Sword, can originally be translated as Fierce Whirlwind Tail Slash, or if you want to be more literal, and in this case inaccurate, Kyo instead of Slash. And the same can be said for one of Chaoshin's special moves, Blue Dragon Whirlwind, and the 4th word was changed to Sword as well. Damien's Hell's Drive and Hell's Gates were changed to have Hades instead of Hell. There's one particular move I want to talk about, which has not been translated inaccurately by the English dub, but its true meaning is very hard to convey in English to just a name. The one I'm talking about is Ryuga's second dark move, which you may have seen translated in several ways, such as Dragon Emperor Soaring Destruction, Dragon Emperor Soaring Kill, Dragon Emperor Devastating Destruction, and perhaps a few more. The first half is clear, so let's focus on the rest. It's made up of these 3 characters: Ten, which can mean Heaven, Sky, or Imperial, Sho, which means soar or fly, and Sats, which means kill, diminish, split, etc. The difficult part here is that they're very ambiguous given our context. Soaring to the heavens or into the Imperial? Well, this is the final form of the Dark Power, so it's certainly not going to be soaring into a good place. It could be interpreted either literally, as is often done, meaning to soar into the sky in order to deliver a final blow to the opponent, or figuratively, as in Ojago is reaching a divine state of power and darkness through this move. This is, in my opinion, very hard to interpret with only one or two words, and to this day I have not thought of a good way to do it. If you have any ideas, feel free to suggest them in the comments below. And the final part of this move, I personally don't like translating literally as kill, because as we see it doesn't exactly result in the opponents dying. More so just putting them into a very long, perhaps even permanent slumber through a dark technique of absorbing most of their energy, but not physically killing them, and their spirits still live on as well, which is why I personally do not think kill is an entirely accurate description to use here either. And also, kill may imply only having one target, and while it is only ever used on one blader at a time, that doesn't necessarily mean it couldn't just be used for other destruction even outside of battle. But again, this is so subjective and speculatory. My personal translation uses devastating destruction, though you could also replace devastating with lethal and destruction with annihilation, but I thought this sounds best. Something very funny I recently discovered thanks to a guy named Poke on Discord is that in the MFB video game Gachinko Stadium, there are actually voice lines of several characters saying the special moves of others. So you could get funny stuff like Jinga or Tsubasa calling out Ryuga's dark move, or Kyoya's special move, or others like this. This could be used to make some very funny skits, so go wild. Another thing that Poke revealed to me is that in the previous section of episode 33, Virgo's spirit appears pink instead of yellow. Whether this is a mistake or an Easter egg, I am not sure, but let me know in the comments what you think. Now we move on to one topic I'm sure is unexpected for all of you, and that is the fact that there is seemingly pretty much no romantic love ever mentioned in the Metal Fight Beyblade anime, besides Chaoshin being a flirt. However, in reality, there is one moment it is actually discussed, and that is in the full version of the Zero G ending theme song. Say what you want about Zero G, but the ending song is awesome, and I actually translated it with the help of Yuria last year. I'll leave the link to it in the description, and you can find our translation in the comments. Check it out and go support the artist Yuki, who sung the opening theme of all the seasons and has re-released them all in rock versions on his channel as well. On to our next topic, the final few episodes of 4D. Honestly, I think they would make a pretty cool movie. But that movie would have to omit certain errors or inconsistencies, which only one true nerd can spot, and here I am to present some of them to you. The first of which I noticed myself, the second of which not. At the end of the episode after Kenta Sagittario evolves, Jinga has a line where he says Kento, but then at the start of the next episode that same exact scene is repeated and Jinga has no line. Right after that, in the scene where Kenta talks, we don't hear Sagittario spin in the background the first time. But in the same exact scene the next episode, we do. One thing you may have gotten confused about when it comes to 4D is the numbering of the episodes. Sometimes it goes up to 154, other times only to 141. The reason for this is that after episode 128, Japan started cutting down the episodes in half and yet still giving them a full number. Certain online releases follow that logic and thus get all the way up to 154, while others have just put the two episodes together and used normal numbering, which I prefer and generally stick to, as I will and have done here. In episode 138, there's one translation error from Aguma in the English dub version. You might remember him planning an attack formation with the other legendary bladers, and then telling Titi to attack how he likes, and aim for when Nemesis switches modes. And yet, just a few short seconds after that, tells Titi to attack before that has yet happened in order to support Variaris. For the longest time, I just played this off as Aguma adapting to the situation and switching plans midway through when necessary. But after thoroughly looking through the Japanese version, it was seen that is not the case. What actually happened was, he told Titi, attack how you like, and then explained to him the plan for the rest of them, and Titi could just join in whenever he wants, not necessarily when Nemesis switches modes. Watch and see how it makes more sense.
King! 一瞬でいい。奴の動きを止めろ。バリアルス！食らえ！アルスの盾！今だ！全員俺を盾にしろ！俺が突破口を開く。お前たちは俺に続いて左右から順にアタックを叩き込め。
わしはどうすればいいけ？
お前は好きに攻めろ。ネメシスを翻弄するんだ。 ボトムが防御に弱い攻撃タイプに変わったところを狙い撃つ。
早くしてくれ。さすがにもう持たれ。
行けテティ。
任せてけー。ケサルコアト
ル。なめるな。ネメシス。今だ。行くぞ。
Something we have all probably wondered at some point is why Jingo's bandana swaps from having only one Pegasus wing to 2 wings in the 3rd season, and maybe why it didn't happen earlier. Either way, it had no relevance in the anime, but it did in the manga. Spoilers ahead, if you don't want to see them, skip to the timestamp on screen. When Jingo was named a Blader by his father in the manga, he got the Pegasus bandana with only one wing, and when Jingo pointed it out, his dad laughed and explained that it was because Jingo was still inexperienced, and when one day Jingo became stronger than him, his dad would give him his own bandana with both of Pegasus' wings. This moment occurred much earlier in the anime, but we saw no bandana swap from it, nor was it ever discussed why Jingo swapped bandanas, unfortunately. In the manga, it happened after Damien tried to kill Jingo, and his dad saved him, telling him to trust in Pegasus and to save the world. One truly heartwarming and simultaneously saddening scene. On the topic of Jingo's dad and their origin story, we have one more thing that was never directly addressed, and that is the fact that after the incident where the Dark Nebula stole El Drago, Como village was seemingly abandoned, with only Hyoma and Hokuto staying there to guard over the place. What's more, we never see any surprise or shock from Jingo at that, nor him asking why that is, which means it must most likely have happened before he left the village, and therefore very shortly after El Drago was taken. From certain scenes, it also seems that his dad, Ryusei, who was trying to hide the fact that he was alive from everyone except Hokuto, did still go outside of the house or have his window open, which is surely not something you'd do if you were worried about the many people in your village possibly seeing you. Another important hint we have is Hokuto's reaction when the Dark Nebula come to look for potential information in Como village, where he says something along the lines of, "No way we would leave any useful information for you out here." All of this is making me think that after the Dark Nebula's infiltration and after Hokuto had told everyone in the village that Ryusei had died, a decision was made to abandon it, both for the people's own safety and for that of the world. Later, however, in the first episode of Season 2, we go to Como village again and still do not see anyone there except Hyoma and Hokuto, so the villagers probably started new lives elsewhere and moved on. Would have been really cool to meet some of them and see their perspective on everything that's occurred. A shame it never happened, but maybe some fanfiction feel for all of you. One more mystery that is very much helped by Jingo's dad is the following. When El Drago's star fragment came to Earth, was it already corrupted, or did it only become corrupt through time and exposure to the evil humans that obtained it? There are conflicting statements on this topic, and it's not easy to give an objective answer. However, there is something we must consider, and that is the difference between the people telling the story. Ryusei is telling a story that he was most likely taught or heard, and then probably confirmed the more important details for himself. But given that it happened so long before his time, his retelling is unlikely to be of complete accuracy. Even his phrasing suggests the uncertainty of details. It was said that the Star Witch fell there, hid inside the dark and evil power. The key point here being, it was said, and the detail we can assume is most evanescent. However, we have one much more reliable source to tell us the origin of El Drago's dark power, and that is of course Ryuga, who fell into the dark power's deepest pit and then was able to master and overcome it, transforming it into his own. He confirms for us that it was indeed the humans' ambition, lust and anger that made up the dark power, that it was power created by humans, and El Drago just absorbed and amplified it, as it presumably would have done any other energy. Absorbed and amplified, but not transformed. Or perhaps, and maybe even more likely, it did, but was unable to fight its ever-growing influence, though we can never be sure. And now, Ryuga's story brings us to the final thing we shall cover for this layer of the iceberg, and that is how he was able to overcome the dark power. Which was, of course, explained in the show. However, the English dub translated it at best very liberally, and at worst completely changed it. Where that rating lies, I'll let you be the judge of. But one thing I can confirm for you is that Ryuga never told Tsubasa to become one with the dark power. The actual line is difficult to interpret, and I actually have a dedicated video to it which you can check out if you want. But in short, he said to give in to it, he did not say become one with it. If you want to know the full nuance of the dark power story, I recommend you check out the subversion of the episodes and also watch my dedicated video on that line to be able to truly grasp its hidden details. Layer -3. We're getting deep. For the first topic of this layer of the iceberg, we have a special move from Kyoya that, for whatever reason, does not appear in the English dub, and that is King Lion exploding waves. It is a very obscure move, only ever used once, in episode 129, when Kyoya broke through Libra's final Judgment Inferno. The English version, weirdly enough, had it be Kyoya's typical King Lion crushing Fang instead. One most unfortunate fact about 40 is that there are no publicly available Japanese subtitles for it, unlike for the first 2 seasons, where subtitles were included with the DVDs. This makes the translation process for it a fair bit more difficult and tedious, though still far from impossible, of course. While I am not sure what the reason for this is, one thing that can be noticed on the Japanese wiki page is that the first 2 seasons DVDs were released by Sony, whereas 4D was released by Warner Brothers. Whether that has something to do with it or not, I'm not sure, but to add even more insult to injury, Japanese subtitles did exist and could be accessed if you were watching the episodes on TV, but seemingly no one has bothered to rip them and back them up. A true pity, but screenshots can still be found online, and that's actually how I was able to verify the special move we just covered. So to the few Japanese bloggers who have put such screenshots on their sites, thank you and may you be blessed. Moving on with even more unreleased stuff, did you know that back in the day, Zero G was actually in the process of getting subbed and ended on episode 19 because the other 7 episodes did not air on Japanese TV, which is why you might hear them referred to as the lost episodes. Nowadays, from what I've been able to tell, those subs are practically lost media, unless you know who to ask, that is. Anyways, if you want to see a re-release of Zero G with the whole season sub, make sure you let me know in the comments. I don't have much motivation to work on Zero G, but if there's enough demand for it, I might do it. Something very curious in the Japanese voice actor industry is that many of them are also singers and have their own songs released, and the Beyblade voice actors are no exception to that. You can find songs by Kenta's voice actress, Emily Kato. Yes, some anime characters have female voice actresses, it is very common in anime. Hikaru's voice actress, Marina Inoue, Hyoma's voice actor, Tetsuya Kakihara, Hokuto's voice actor, Hozumi Koda, Tsubasa's voice actor, Miyu Irino, Ryuteru's voice actor, Hiroyuki, Ryuga's voice actor, Kenjiro Tsuda, and so many more. I will leave links in the description where you can listen to songs from them and several more as well. They really are worth a listen. Something people very often like to joke about is how Moses split the sea with the Beyblade. While that is certainly a very interesting revelation, it's not the only time Beyblade intertwined with history. Most notably, an era from real Chinese history known as the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period. In universe, that is caused by the rebel group known as the Bailin Fist sprouting up to try and take control of the Bailin Temple, and the conflict spread throughout the whole of China in the blink of an eye. Naturally, I'm not very informed on this topic, however, I will mention that the many scholars of the Bailin Fist, or another translation would be the 100 Schools of Bailin Fist, probably has something to do with the term from China called the 100 Schools of Thought. These are philosophies and schools that flourished during that exact period and significantly influenced East Asian society and culture. This is a very complicated topic, so if you want me to do more research on it and make a whole dedicated video, let me, or in fact your other favorite creators, know in the comment sections. Honestly, it's unlikely I will end up covering it further, but it is a very curious topic and I'll be very glad to see it discussed, perhaps even by one of you. On to one very unclear mystery. What or who exactly are Pluto and Rago? Pluto himself states that he is King Hades' descendant, which simplifies things to an extent, though it is clear he is no average human. For Rago, however, the answer is much more complicated. He is described as the word Mo Shigo in Japanese, and here are the word's meanings. Another description of Rago is the following: the descendant of the blader who was entrusted Nemesis by King Hades. And the English dub got this line wrong and had it instead as the descendant of the blader King Hades entrusted to Nemesis so long ago. Rago describes Nemesis as something along the lines of my obedient being. But what makes this question ever more peculiar is the monster that Rago and Pluto become after they escape Zeus's barrier. Not only do they take only one form, through which they both talk, but they begin to use I instead of we. I shall destroy. I ripped away at the opening inside Zeus's barrier, not we. And Rago's comment where he said that he may be or appear as Rago, but that he is not Rago or that Rago does not exist. There are several ways you could interpret what he said, since, as always, Japanese is a very ambiguous language. But in my opinion, he's saying Rago is only a form he took. Yuki also describes Rago as someone who possesses or inherits the will of Hades, or in my own words, the perpetuator of Hades as well. Given all of this, I'm still unsure of the intricacies of their reality. However, I personally think Rago is most likely King Hades reincarnated, and Pluto is just his descendant who, one way or another, has learned to follow this history and is very skilled in the dark arts, as shown by him being able to control dynamics through the cursed pendant. If you have any other theories or ideas, let me know and we can discuss it. Another person whose existence is a mystery to us is Reggie. What's being stated is that he's being cultivated by the Dark Netherworld, but that is not entirely clear in what it means. Does that mean he grew up there? Does it mean he was abducted as a child and turned into a weapon? Does it mean he was created there through an artificial way? We do not know. The scenery we see him being cultivated in is insanely creepy. A dark area with screens and a green tint, as if coming from Poison Serpent. And that is another mystery we have. His bay. Is it an evil bay? Is it a corrupted bay like El Drago? Who created it? One small hint we have is that there are other serpent bays in the series with seemingly no dark attributes, so it is probably somehow manipulated by the Dark Nebula, or in fact, perhaps this was done through the arrangement system as well. We saw the arrangement system for the first time in Season 2, but we do not know necessarily when it was created, and we do know that everything was secretly being controlled behind the scenes by Pluto, so it is very possible. We shall never know, but in my opinion, there's a good chance the arrangement system was used on Reggie in some way, perhaps differently to how it was used on Zeo, Jack and Damien. Something to notice, those three changed but then become completely different people after receiving an arrangement. Unlike Toby, who became Faust and whose mind was completely changed. Maybe Reggie was the prototype for mind control and adaptation to a custom created Dark Bay. Alas, this remains a mystery, but it is an interesting topic to theorize on and could perhaps hint at even more depth to the series that has gone by almost entirely unnoticed, just like our next topic. Episode 39, we see part of what makes Bays alive and actual mindful creatures. Pegasus and Jinga using techniques not of their own creation, but ones that have been used against them. This is not something that happens very often, partially because almost no blader seems to even think about this. We see it happen and yet it's not discussed, worked upon, or thought through. It's just something that happens for Jinga naturally after all the practice he's had. Overall, a big mistake he seemingly never reflected on it in my opinion. Most people would ignore this and put it off as just power or friendship. But what if I told you it is instead a setup for extremely important things to come in the far future of the series? Layer -4. Rago and Nemesis. The ultimate boss of the series, not only being able to mimic the powers of the legendary bladers, but also of every single bay they have ever fought. How though? There is an answer, through which everything makes sense. Nemesis is not stealing the powers of the legendary bladers' base per se. It is stealing humongous amounts of their energy, which it then not only processes as its own, but it takes in every single part of their knowledge, their memories, every single thing that the energy contains, which is what lets it use the powers of any bay they have ever fought as well. Nemesis and Rago are on a completely different level to anyone else. Not so much in power, but in knowledge and technique, on a level even higher than Ryuga's. And this may also be the reason for why Nemesis transformed only after it stole Drago's energy directly, because Ryuga was also on a level so much higher than any of the other legendary bladers. None of their base memories contained enough to truly grasp the full extent of Drago's power and abilities. There is much more to this as well, and several other mysteries in the series, such as what exactly happened to Storm Pegasus, and did Ryuga die? Unlike what many may think, I believe we have clear answers to both questions. The short version of these answers I will give you here, but if you want to know exactly why and how, I recommend you check out my video essay on the series, where I cover all of this and much more in depth. If you do watch it, make sure you turn on captions, because the subtitles etched into the video have a lot of mistakes and inaccuracies. If not though, here are the answers you're looking for. Storm Pegasus and Galaxy Pegasus are both based with access to the same entity Pegasus, but Pegasus is a very wild and powerful entity that only extremely few people are capable of controlling, so the prototype Galaxy Pegasus, which presumably has full access to its power, was put away, and Storm Pegasus, which is a version limited in power connection, was created. Storm Pegasus disappeared after the fight with Lightning Drago because Jinga was able to bring out all of its power and beyond. Galaxy Pegasus recognized Jinga, and Jinga shortly did find out that he had definitely not connected to the whole of Pegasus in the past, and had to learn to listen to his bay and connect more mindfully. As for whether Ryuga lived, it is likely that when Rago finished him, he also corrupted Drago to make sure they can never again rise. What Nemesis cannot put away is the Star Fragment's energy, which is what kept Ryuga alive until he gave his Star Fragment to Kent. Afterwards, when Nemesis was defeated, the whole world was fixed, and with it also any active corruption that remained, including Ryuga's Drago. And remember, Ryuga is one of Drago. So yes, Ryuga is alive, without a physical body and resting in the cosmos, and he could return one day. The ending all but confirms this in my opinion, and again, if you want to know the details of all of this, watch my video essay. But before that, we have our final topic, a very obscure question to which I still have not been able to discover an answer to this day. Layer -5, Barisha Kamidove. A special move from the sidest of side characters, Putin's Barisha Kamidove. There are no such words in Japanese usually. The second word likely comes from bear in Russian, which is Medved, but for the first one, I, as well as all my translator friends, have no idea. The English dub has it as... I actually can't tell, but it's something different to the Japanese. The Bulgarian dub has it in Russian, Bolshoi Medved, which means big bear. The French dub does not seem to have it in French either, and sounds like the same as the Japanese. My friends from different nationalities have also informed me that in Polish it is bear paw smash or something similar, in Dutch it is black rose petal, and in Arabic it is black lily. I don't know any of these languages, so I cannot confirm myself, but I believe them. If you look up Bari Shaka online in Japanese, you see that it only appears on 3 sites, all of which are referring to this special move, but none of which explain its meaning. This is the final mystery for Beyblade, and if you have any ideas or theories for what it might mean, please do let me know in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed learning about this.